The USNS Eltanin was a cargo ship acquired by the US Navy in 1957 that in 1962 was designated as an oceanographic research vessel, a ship designed to conduct various research at sea, and Eltanin was assigned to operate in Antarctic waters. Named after a star in the Draco constellation, she measured the sea's temperature, salinity, and depth, took core samples, and took photographs of the seafloor with a camera attached to a cable. On August 29, 1964, Eltanin took this picture while photographing the ocean depths west of Cape Horn, in a depth of 3,1904 meters. On December 5, 1964, the image went public in a news item in the New Zealand Herald, headlined Puzzle Picture from Seabed, describing the photograph as appearing to be a complex radio aerial jutting out of the mud bottom. The article included an interview with Dr. Thomas Hopkins, a senior marine biologist specializing in plankton studies, who was on board of the ship. He pointed to the implausibility of the object, estimated to be about 60 centimeters tall, being a plant, given the impossibility of photosynthesis in such depths. He said the ship photographer had been questioned, but everyone was certain that the picture was not fake. Quote, "I wouldn't like to say the thing is man-made, because this brings up the problem of how one would get it there. But it's fairly symmetrical, and the offshoots are all 90 degrees apart. This is why it has been argued for so long." In 1968, the story became more popular with a publication in the American Saga magazine, titled Unidentified Underwater Saucers, where the writer Brad Steiger makes some unfounded claims that the expedition, quote, photographed a astonishing piece of machinery, very much like a cross between a TV antenna and a telemetry antenna. He also speculated that the antenna was used to monitor seismic activity. Also, for some reason, while a picture of the USNS Eltanin is in the article, it does not include the photograph taken of the strange object discussed by it. Brad Steiger was an American writer who had fiction and non-fiction works on topics such as spirituality, UFOs, true crime, Atlantis, ancient astronauts, vampires, etc. He was widely criticized for making far-fetched pseudoscientific claims without any concrete evidence, and normally would not be considered a reliable source of legit information. But this dubious interpretation was implemented in the theories of Bruce Cathy, a New Zealand airline pilot who, after a UFO sighting over Monaco Harbor in 1962, that, quote, changed his life dramatically, wrote 7 books about flying saucers and the world energy grid. Bruce believed that many major UFO research groups may be fronts for intelligence organizations gathering information on the public's awareness of the UFOs. He concluded that traditional investigative methods that mainly involve collecting sighting reports are ineffective. Influenced by the work of French author Aimé Michel, he began plotting UFO sightings on maps to uncover any patterns. "I decided long ago that the only way to tackle the problem would be to plot all the areas of activity and try to find some logical mathematical order in the hovering positions or flight paths of the unknowns. To this purpose, I studied the methods of Frenchmen by the name of Aimé Michel, who had also endeavored to find a mathematical order of this nature." Bruce formed a complete grid network over New Zealand area and concluded that, after discovering this small section of a potential world system, he now decided to transfer this small section and align it into a whole planet model. He then brought the discovery of this antenna-like object into his model. Quote, "It was then brought to my notice that a strange aerial-like object had been photographed by chance by the American ship Eltanin. The object was 2 to 3 feet high and had 6 main crossbars spaced evenly up its stem with a smaller one at the top. I had a hunch that this could be the point I was looking for, upon which to orientate a world grid, if in fact one existed. I spent some time constructing grid patterns on a plastic ball until I found a system which could be transferred onto a world surface and aligned with the aerial-type object and the section of the grid discovered over New Zealand. I found that the patterns matched and felt sure then that a global system was almost a certainty. After that, he started to, quote, find the mathematical basis for the system, and claimed, Finally, after years of work, I discovered that I could formulate a series of harmonic unified equations, which indicated that the whole of physical reality was in fact manifested by a complex pattern of interlocking waveforms. I won't go in depth into Bruce's theories. He has 7 books explaining them if you are interested, but I would advise you to take his work with a grain of salt. For years, this mysterious object was integrated in various conspiracy theories as a surviving artifact from a lost civilization of Antarctica or an extraterrestrial communication device placed here by ancient aliens. But in 2003, UFO researcher Larry Hatch claimed to have found the truth about the object. In his website, he explained that the 1971 book The Face of the Deep by Bruce C. Hisen and C. D. Hollister clarified the true identity of the object, identifying it as a Cladoreza concatensis, described in the book Three Cruises of the Blake. The author, Alexander Agassiz, was a marine zoologist, oceanographer, and mining engineer who joined the ship in December 1877, with dredges and trawls for deep biological sampling. Figure 541 of the book shows a drawing of the sponge along with the following on page 177. Fragments and moderately complete specimens of the Cladoreza were not uncommon in the deeper dredgings of the Blake. They are sponges with a long stem ending in ramifying roots deeply sunk in the mud. The stem has nodes with 4 to 6 club-shaped appendages. As Thompson has noticed, they evidently often cover, like bushes, extensive tracts of the bottom. The book The Face of the Deep, on pages 36 and 37 says, Cladoreza has been photographed on a manganese nodule-covered bottom in the Bellingshausen Sea. It is interesting to note that of the 16 pictures taken at this particular location, only one such sponge was observed. Apparently the population was not as dense here as in areas where Challenger and Blake dredged. The Agassiz drawing showed the club-like appendages to be curved, the lower drooping down and the upper raised, whereas in the photograph we see that this creature actually lives erect with the appendages oriented horizontally at right angles to the nearly straight vertical stem. The tips of the appendages show up so brightly in the photograph as to suggest that either they are of an extremely light color or that they phosphoresce. By the way, in 2020, researchers discovered the first evidence of bioluminescence in the phylum Polyphera in sponges of the same family of the photographed by the Eltanin, Cladodesidae. Also, on page 433, the book showed a photograph in a much wider shot that I hadn't seen before, displaying the antenna object as a finer detail in the top of the image while describing the nodules on the seafloor. Nowadays, the valid scientific name for the sponge is Chondrodocladia concrensis, still a member of the Cladodesidae family. For what I was able to find, there are not other photographs of that species, but images of close relatives can show us a bit more of how this family of carnivore sponges looks like. So, is the Eltanin just a carnivorous sponge? Some argue against it. The Universe Inside You website, the ultimate sanctuary for those who seek to unravel the mysteries of our forgotten past and the cosmic connections that shape our existence. They point out how the subject in the Eltanin photo is, quote, very geometrical and has precise angles and formations, which can't be said for the sea sponges to which is compared. However, the Eltanin subject doesn't have a perfect uniform geometrical structure. Furthermore, the photographs of other sponges from the same family show equivalent geometrical structure. It has a level of geometric formation that is totally plausible in nature without the need for it being artificially created. They also point out the fact that the Eltanin subject was solitary. Quote, another predicament with this hypothesis is that Cladoreza concrensis lives in colonies and quickly reproduces. This marine species possesses an asexual reproduction, which occurs when a small piece of the sponge breaks off and reattaches to the seafloor, forming a nearly identical organism and eventually an entire colony. No such thing was found at the sea bottom, as the object was standing all alone. It is true that the species of Cladoreza is originally described as eventually forming colonies, but as we have seen in the photographs, there are plenty of images of members of the Cladodesidae family that appear to be solitary or at least very far apart from other individuals. The third and final argument is that the picture taken from Eltanin was shot at a depth of exactly 2.5 miles, or 4 kilometers. At that depth, no sunlight can reach the seabed, making the existence of any sea sponges or plants highly impossible. It is true that photosynthetic sea plants are not found at such depths. However, sea sponges are not plants, and those types of sponges are found specifically at those depths. We can conclude that this was an overblown case of wild assumptions and sensationalism of a single photograph taken of the seafloor, and it is sound to say that the Eltanin didn't even photograph such a particular otherworldly subject. There are even members of the Chondrocladia genus who have more unusual looks. The Eltanin antenna was nothing more than a sea sponge from the Cladorhisidae family, perhaps being Chondrocladia concrensis.